Make a Path presents Let's Talk.
Welcome to Make a Path Presents. If you're new here, this is a rating review for 509, so there will be spoilers. Now for the rating, this is a very good episode. Let's Talk, episode 509. What happened and what's going on? First, let's jump into some facts. Greg Nicotero said on The Talking Dead that 17 days have passed since episode 8 and episode 9. Andrew Lincoln, the actor that plays Rick, was in fact the voice on the radio that Tyrese heard, or was hallucinating. The group did take Noah to honor Beth. Rick said and confirmed through dialogue in this episode that Dawn did kill Beth, and she said she didn't mean to. Rick said it specifically. He saw it. He knew it was an accident, a horrible, tragic accident. And that's what Dawn said. That was muted with the style and the way they filmed that. She said, I didn't mean to. Beth's return in episode 9 was pitched and filmed way before we ever saw her death on TV. So it was in no way a byproduct of the petition, meaning Beth fans mad about Beth's death did not bring Beth back for episode 9. It was already filmed and in the can before we ever saw her death. Now, let's move on to my favorite scene of this episode. You gotta give it to the governor hallucination attacking Tyrese, and it turns into a Walker in real life attacking Tyrese. That was awesome, and it was a nice jump scare. It was a well-earned jump scare, not no cheap one. And now, this one is pretty awesome. I do have to say, it was a tough one for a favorite and a runner-up. It was when Tyrese was hallucinating and the girls were grabbing his arm, and they filmed it borderline where it was just too much, and you were starting to think like, this is kind of going on a little too much, and then immediately we see Rick tugging away on the arm, and Michonne chops it. I loved that. I friggin' loved that. And when you're writing and designing these scenes, that was genius. I absolutely love that, because a lot goes into thinking that out. One would think, oh yeah, you just let's have him cut off the arm, but it's like, no. How do we have it impactful in a unique way? Loved it. Now, moving on to some characters in this episode, we get a small taste of some big development. Now, Glenn to me is like the sweetheart of the group. You know what I mean? He's youth, he's the kid, he was funny, joking around, and he's also a character in the show and in the comic that, as of yet, has not killed a human being. Now, we see in the truck when Tyrese is talking, Glenn is looking at his reflection, he's hearing what Tyrese is saying, and then finally, at the end of the scene, he breaks the CD. Some symbolism, his reflection in the CD, and he breaks it. That was just a little tease. I thought that was all they were going to give us, but they give us more. Later in dialogue, Glenn tells Rick that, yo, remember how I made us stop to check in those containers? If it was today, if it was right now, I wouldn't stop. I would keep going. Glenn is getting hardened by the events, by what they're going through. The tragedy is hardening him. Now, Michonne's character, she's also fighting growing hardened as well. She's also witnessing the group grow hardened. But in this episode, she's also somewhat the voice of reason to keep going to Washington, D.C. She does play an important role because she does convince Rick to go on ahead to Washington. And now to Tyrese's death. Now, I thought Tyrese was going to go out fighting a herd, maybe even holding a herd back. We all get these superhero thoughts of how characters are going to go out. You know, a lot of people thought, especially Beth fans, thought Beth would go out saving the whole group with like a bandana like Rambo tied around her head. And these predictions are sometimes unrealistic, oftentimes unrealistic. And, you know, I did it myself. I thought Tyrese would go out like a beast. And Tyrese didn't. He went out rather anticlimactic, and what it meant, what it represented, the actual way he died was, it's only a matter of seconds. If you're distracted just for a matter of seconds, that's the difference between life and death. And I heard Scott Gimple, after this episode, he said in an interview that that's what it was. Tyrese was distracted by just a matter of mere seconds, and that's all it took. And that is the life they live out on this road, out in the wild, in this new world. And that actually helped me a lot to cope with how he died, because, again, I had these grand ideas that he was going to go out in a big way. His episode, he went out in a big way, but he himself, the act, was in a big way. But just hearing Scott Gimple say that, it kind of made me think about it. And I was like, you know what, I do like that now. Okay, I accept that, you know? Like Sons of Anarchy. I accept that. And the familiar faces. I know some people weren't really pleased with the familiar faces. I was. I liked seeing the governor back. And I liked seeing Bob back. And it was nice to have Beth there. Even if you're not a fan of Beth, that was nice. You know what I'm saying? And it belonged. Let's just say that. It really belonged. It was a nice fit. And here's another thing, too. Tyrese wasn't hallucinating that fast because of the fever. You know, a lot of people were like, how is he hallucinating that fast? He just got bit. It was the loss of blood that started hallucinating. Then the fever came on, and that added to the hallucination. And although we saw the important characters that were in the show for a while, the most impactful one, I thought, was actually Martin. Or was it Marvin? Holy crap, I always screw his name up. He was a character that was talking to Tyrese in episode 1, and now, when you rewatch episode 1, you watch it differently, because you know what plays out in episode 9. And I like that. I like that a lot. And now the radio when Tyrese is dying, to me, it was symbolic. I could be way off here. Just a little warning. To me, the radio was symbolic for being strong, holding on to strength, and dealing with things. And the reason I get that is because of Tyrese's dialogue in this episode and how his father had him listening to the radio. And what we heard, it was Rick's voice. It was a hallucination. I do not believe that this was word for word what Tyrese heard in the past, but I believe it was similar. Because it was Tyrese's hallucination, so he's going to pull from things that are similar, that he knows, like Rick's voice, the sound of Rick's voice. The stories he heard, these are probably stories, interestingly enough, of what happened when Outbreak first started. And that was another thing I really liked. But in his final moments, he says, turn off the radio. And it was like he was done dealing, he was done being strong. He wanted to die in peace. And for that character, I thought that matched and fit well, very well. And now finally, for the big mystery of the episode, it showed how smart and strategic Rick is, because he said we can't bunker down here. With the thickness of the woods surrounding us, we'll never see our enemies when they attack, and they'll be right up on us. Well, we know that when Greg Nicotero was on The Talking Dead, he said that that's what happened to that community. Or that's what's most likely what happened to that community. Bad people came. The wall was kicked in. It was pushed in. And these people had their heads bashed in. And that's another thing. Remember I said that the walkers were missing their torsos and their heads. And then later we saw Rick ram the car and the torsos and heads came pouring out. And the head either looked like it was a W or a Roman numeral. Maybe they were counting the walkers and carving the numbers in their heads. The jury's still out on that, but everyone's going with the W. There will be follow-up videos that go over some of the mysteries. And yes, I must have got 50 messages asking, did you see Glenn holding the bat? And it was funny, I wasn't being a dick, but I did say, how can you miss it? You know, how do you miss that? Alright guys, listen. Yes, it was a huge, giant, possible Easter egg. That's another thing I'm taking a lot of flack for, is because until I see it, guys, I don't say it's 100% this. I keep my options open. You know what I mean? And that is what I feel helps me have an open mind. I definitely believe there's a lot of Negan and the Savior's Easter eggs here. I think it's very, very possible that Negan's group could have ran through Wiltshire Estates. However, I'm not saying it was definitely Negan. I'm not saying it was definitely the Saviors. I am not sold on the idea yet. I'm still keeping an open mind. With that said, I do want to know what you felt. I'm done talking. It's your turn.
Subscribe now.